Holla ballers, what's going on? It's Preacher and we're doing the final Proving Ground Gold Medal Challenge. It is the Melee DPS. I decided, what the hell, I'm going to roll on a DK. I haven't played a DK in so damn long. This is a good opportunity just to sit back and play my Unholy DK. Melee is different to the range one. I was told that the melee one was different to the range one, which I kind of understood. There were certain mechanics that went on in the range damage Proving Ground, which didn't seem to be worthwhile for melee. I guess is what I want to say there, is that there was lessons to be learned for the ranged guys that wouldn't have translated well into the melee. Well, sorry to say this, they're pretty much exactly the same besides the first 3 packs. By about pack number 4 or wave number 4 or whatever you want to say, they go to exactly the same packs that the casters have. And this leads to kind of an interesting problem. I'm not quite sure what we're supposed to learn from the melee Proving Ground other than DPS, I guess is what's trying to be demonstrated here. The other ones have definite sort of lessons to be learned. The healer one does, the range DPS one certainly does. Great stuff about positioning, great stuff without controlling mobs and tricking things. All this kind of stuff is relevant and it's worthwhile, and it generally makes it a good idea to go and get a gold medal. If you want to do endless, sure, go ahead and do that as a little bit of a fun activity. I think you earn a little title for doing that. But for the melee guys, I'm just not getting it. I'm not getting it at all. It's a little bit weird. In fact, it's not easy, I want to say. I definitely felt like it was a little bit easier because I was on a Death Knight. And, not that I think it would be too much different on a Warrior, particularly. But it wasn't... There was nothing to be learned here. And that's a big problem, right? For the Proving Grounds, there was nothing much to be learned here. What did I learn? What did I do, I guess is what I want to say. What did I do here that maybe I wouldn't do in a 5-man? Is kind of the idea. Well, I slowed mobs. Certainly, I use Chains of Ice on the mobs that run away. As a caster, that's not a big deal. You still have to follow them as a caster, I suppose. So I used Slow, and I used Interrupt. Beyond that, beyond those couple of things, not a great deal. Not a great deal. It's at some point during this, I even noticed that my pet isn't set to auto-attack. So I was just ignoring my pet throughout most of this, which some of you will find is like, okay, you did it without your pet? Yeah. Yeah, pretty much on most occasions I actually did this without my pet. He was set to defensive for some reason. As you can see, this pack is straight out of the ranged DPS one. If you've watched that first, then you'll recognize this pack completely. It's the Guardians. Now, this isn't particularly difficult because melee tends to, especially in comparison to the Shadow Priest, which I did the ranged Proving Ground Gold Medal on, a lot more burst. On-demand burst is pretty natural to most melee classes, should I want to line up, say, a ton of Heroic Strikes and Mortal Strikes and Colossus Smashes. Therefore, the Banshees weren't a big deal. The Banshees were actually a really minor part. As you can see, I'm going to just decimate this Banshee in a couple of seconds, whereas the Shadow Priest, it was certainly more of a pain. Wasn't really a big deal, to the point where I kind of had fun. From here on, the packs are complete duplicates if you're doing the ranged or you're doing the melee. And they're easier in general. I can't see how this would have been a problem on any class. On the ranged DPS, it was actually quite kind of a little plan in which way to trick these healer mobs into making sure they healed those in the middle. Well, as a melee class, you have some sort of bursty AoE spell anyway. You could just drop it, be it a Thunderclap, be it a Hammer of the Righteous, for Christ's sake, or a Divine Storm if you save one. Any of those things can be done very, very quickly in a swift motion, and therefore it was less relevant towards the melee class guide. I'm struggling with this one. I'm struggling to understand its purpose. The melee could have had a lot more stuff going on. I would like to have seen them having ground effects to deal with. That seems to be the biggest problem for me, is ground effects and debuffs and all that kind of stuff. In fact, the only inconvenience were the Amber Shaper globules, and I say that with wholehearted pain, because they were just irritating. They weren't something that I was actually bothered by. More of the case that happens. If you're in melee range, you get hit by it. And it's actually got quite a large AoE, in which case you run the risk of, even when you move away, I mean, nobody likes having to run away. I kind of understand that is a lesson that some melee have to learn. But you can see there, you just actively have to run the hell away in order to avoid it. That ain't fun. And it's not much to learn. It's more of an inconvenience than anything. There's actually a strange section during the, I believe it's the bronze, the bronze medal, which you have to do before you can come and do the gold, where there are 2 amber shapers and a mob in the middle. There's 2 ambers on either side and a mob in the middle. You can be permanently stun locked. If you get caught once by accident, and of course things like Icebound Fortitude and any stun breaker will get you out of there. If you do get caught with that, you can be perma-stunned. They had the weird situation where, just by pure laziness, I guess, because it was the bronze, which is generally completely trivial, or the silver, which is completely trivial as well, where I failed it because I was just stun locked. I was just sat there and I'd used my Icebound Fortitude elsewhere for some reason, and I just had to sit there. And that happens. This is like the only problem with being the melee, is that if you're too close, and I mean you can be pretty far away and still be too close, is that you can fail it because of this. And that's it. That's the crux of it. There was a lot to learn as melee. Where's the cleave mobs, Blizz? Where's these things that we need to learn about as melee? We should have had a ton more spellcasters. All the melee guys have really good interrupts. I would love to have seen something going on. Force me to use a bit of CC, maybe. This seemed more in line with the healer one, that is super basic, but ultimately you end up doing what every DPSer does anyway, which is just zerg the crap out of it. There's nothing else to do. There's nothing to be learned, nothing to be tried and tested. Disappointed in this proving ground, I've got to be honest, disappointed. I did do it first try. It was difficult to fail. You can see I even got stunned a couple of times. It's no big deal. You put out so much damage, and you tend to be cleaving, or in any class can compete on this sort of level, that it wasn't really a big deal. I'm sure there's some guys out there who are saying they're really struggling. I know, for instance, that the balance druids and, in fact, the fire mages are struggling a lot due to the gear scaling, and that causing huge problems for those guys because they're not very good until they get very good gear. That they're having issues, but ultimately that's a slight effect of class balance. I can't think of a melee class that might struggle with this. Perhaps they can mutilate rogue, but all they'll be doing is spamming rupture. I don't get this one. There was an opportunity here to teach something to the melee guys that they don't ordinarily know. And there was good opportunity to do this, to watch for debuffs. I kind of harken back to the Black Temple, to the Sisters of Pain. They might have been more relevant than Banshees, as Banshees can easily be zerged by a melee DPS. In terms of watching for debuffs where attacking with melee actually causes you problems, and therefore causing a melee to actually understand and look at debuffs. I didn't have to do that particularly. I didn't have to do any of that. I was trying all the time while doing this to think of a class that didn't really match up to the standards here. I'm sure there is one who's going to say their class is struggling in particular, or their spec is struggling. I can only feel for you and just understand that this is actually relatively simple content, ultimately to grab your gold medal. Endless might be more difficult, although I have read that some warriors and DKs are actually just bored of Endless already because they're finding it very difficult to lose. On a lot of occasions, you can actually end up with a lot of downtime. And if you've seen through the video, I had sort of 11 seconds downtime, 15 seconds downtime. Disappointed in this one, Blizz. Little bit disappointed. Didn't have to play well, didn't really have to care. Missed opportunity in my opinion, but there you go. That's how you get your gold medal, guys. Easy as that. Take it easy, guys. Bye-bye.